Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LocoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Conlon, owner of Team LocoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend. You know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com. All right, y'all, and we are back. I am joined this week with Coach Sam.
Hello.
That's the cue. I just opened my hands. I'm like the smiling emoji with like the hands open. And this podcast, I'm really excited about. You brought this topic up to me. I was like, yes, 100%. We need to talk about this. This really is, I would say, probably the cornerstone of what we use for coaching, or one of the cornerstones for coaching in order to actually make real change. And a lot of people think like, oh, it's, I'm not successful with my diet because of this thing, right? Or like, I'm not successful with my diet or my training because I don't have the right program, or whatever it might be, like whatever change that you're trying to make, you think that you're not making progress because of, some kind of program or whatever it might be. Yeah. In reality, like, yes, obviously you need a good program. Yes, you need good coaching, but really your mindset around this, and particularly having a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset, is so important. And the clients who can harness this are the most successful clients. So you wanted to bring this up, so you dive right into it. And here's the floor, Sam.
Yeah, and I like that. You're so right. There's so many things that people can, I hate to say blame or use as an excuse, but there are real things in our life that pose a challenge, but it really is the mindset that we bring to them, to how big of an impact they are. And so the whole theory that we're really talking about is the mindset theory, and it was pretty much established by Carol Dweck. She also has a book of the same name, Mindset, and it's a self-perception theory on how you see yourself. And she has two main mindsets. There's the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And so the fixed mindset is really just thinking you have unchangeable traits, like the way you are is fixed. And they are people who make comments like, oh, I just can't, or this is just the way I am, or I've always been this way, or my favorite is I know myself. And it's like very, again, static.
Immature, one could say.
Maybe.
In certain instances, it definitely is.
Yes. And I'll preface this. The reason I was so interested in this in the first place when I first heard about it is because I was in such a fixed mindset place. And people with a fixed mindset are often like perfectionists and overachievers because, yeah, we can have
We're like, hey!
It does. Because we're focused on success. Like, we want to be successful, and it's about the grade. It's not about what you learn on the way. So it really is like outcome focused. Did I get an A or not? Did I
Stop talking shit about me, Sam, all right?
I'm sorry, Lauren. Are you getting triggered? Am I attacking you? No, this is totally me growing up too. And I think these are ways that we're different. At least I know I am now, but people with a fixed mindset often see failure as a bad thing. Like, the worst thing that could happen is that I could fail. So for that reason, they avoid challenges. They avoid hard things because, oh God, what if I fail? So they often seek the safe route, or else they might look stupid if they can't do it. And then they're highly focused on comparison and making sure that they are better than everyone, as opposed to like, did I learn something from this? Was I the best? Mm-hmm. And so that's the fixed mindset in a nutshell. And then when we shift to the growth mindset, it's pretty much just the exact inverse. Like, people with a growth mindset see their traits as changeable. Like, they're the I can't do this yet people, or I haven't done it yet, or I have been like this, but people. It's always changeable. They don't attach themselves to fixed labels, where someone with a fixed mindset might say, I'm just stupid. Someone with a growth mindset will say, I don't know that yet. They don't label themselves as much. They're much more focused on developing their traits as opposed to winning or losing. So they're more focused on the process. And they see failure very differently, as opposed to that being the worst thing. They actually see it as a good thing. What can I learn from this? And for that reason, they love a challenge, because I want to try the hard thing, because even if I don't get it right, at least I'm going to learn something from it. And they're much more focused on themselves as opposed to like comparison and like, how have I grown throughout this process? And I think that the best thing about this whole thing is that like the theory in itself means that you can change this. If you do feel like you're a fixed mindset, like you can change this. And I think that's something that, at least in my case, I've seen with some of my most successful clients is the shift from all or nothing, black and white, I am or I can't, to a growth mindset.
100%. And what's interesting about this is that, it's not like this, again, it's not an all or nothing thing, right? So if you're listening and you're like, hey, like that's me sometimes, but like not all the time, that's kind of how it works, right? Like, so some people, they might be very fixed in their, relationships in their life. But then they're very, they have a huge growth mindset with their business, right? Or vice versa. Some people are, have a great growth mindset in relation to, the relationships in their lives. But maybe with business or work or their career, they're very fixed. This could also, of course, lead to, any kind of competitive event. This could lead to any type of what we deal with on a daily basis, like diet, training, lifestyle changes, all of these things. And this is, like I said, one of the most important facets. And I often have clients who, something comes up, right? And a really common thing, especially because everybody's been traveling again recently, I've been getting a lot of clients who started traveling again, and maybe they didn't have really the best habits when they were traveling before. But they haven't really done it in a while, right? So they know that they want to change this, but they haven't really even been in that position. And now they get thrown right back into it and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm such a failure. I didn't do this right. I didn't take it seriously. I'm like, so you're telling me that you had years of bad behaviors built up with your, what you normally do when you travel, and you thought that this one trip was going to be great. Like, no, you're literally setting yourself up for failure if you think like that. Yeah. So instead of saying like, oh, I had the wrong plan, or like, I'm this failure, I'm this loser, it's like, no, like you didn't have the best trip. We can learn from that. We can say, okay, where were the issues? How do we progress from there and move forward? And that's such a simple example, but that really has like a big kind of like snowball effect, right? So like when one thing happens, basically if you, this is where you always hear people where they're like, oh, I had a bad meal and then I went and did all these other things. I didn't train for 3 days. I barely drank any water. I got super drunk one night. I ate everything in my pantry. And you're like, whoa, why did that happen after one meal off? But it's because of this fixed mindset around your goals. And I can 100% relate because I'm self-aware enough to know that I do have a fixed mindset still in certain areas. Of course, always trying to improve and work on that. But if you are kind of predisposed to those tendencies and those personality traits, it's going to be a lot harder. And like you mentioned in the beginning, people who are perfectionists, people who are very type A, it's going to be something that is harder because you're always going to see things as either like good, bad, like yes, no, like I did or I didn't, like this was great, or like a fucking failure. Like that's just kind of how we compartmentalize things in our brains. But really in the reality, it's like, hey, especially when it comes to diet, training, lifestyle stuff, you can't live in that space. Otherwise, you're always going to set yourself up for failure, and you're always going to continue with those negative compensatory behaviors.
Yeah. And I think that recognizing those traits in yourself is the first step to changing them, to say, oh shit, that is me, is like that. And that was me when I first started this research. I was like, okay, yeah, I took the easy way in college. I wanted to do one thing, but it was too much work, and I wanted to be successful, so I picked another major. I always picked the easy project. I didn't compete for the longest time, and I've told you this before, but it's the dumbest thing. I didn't compete because I didn't know how to pose. Why would I inherently know how to pose? Like, it's those kind of things that you don't know until you start recognizing it. So knowing those traits of a fixed mindset and then knowing how you can shift them to a growth mindset, I think is probably the first thing you can do in coming out of having a fixed mindset.
Mm-hmm. One of the most powerful things, and I've talked about this book 8 million times because that's how important it was to me, The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal. So good. It's very well written. It's 100% backed by research, but it's not like it reads well. So it's not like super nerdy and like hard to get through. And when, similar idea talking about, but using more stress as more of the example, people can your stress perception really affects how you handle things in life. So, stress can either be harmful and detrimental, or stress can be positive and a challenge, right? So if you have this negative stress perception, everything is a challenge. You feel like you don't have the resources to do these types of things. And you always kind of feel perpetually behind. You always feel like a failure, like you never really take, initiative, etc. And then or you're just always fucking stressed out and a ball of mush, right? So like that's one thing. But
No,
actually, but actually, stress is not a bad thing inherently. That's one of the main takeaways from our book. So much of the stress research has been completely bastardized, and especially with like, fucking fake headlines and, clickbait science type things. So it's really not stress that's the problem, it's your perception of it. So, okay, are you in this negative stress perception, or do you have this positive perception and, you look at stressors as a challenge? Do you use this as a way to like, okay, I'm going to rise up and I'm going to use this energy, I'm going to do something productive. So it's the same kind of thing here. And it's so, so valuable because, like I said, this is by and large the most important thing that clients can work on. And this ties into our whole message as a company about diet flexibility. Diet flexibility doesn't mean eating cheeseburgers for every meal. That's not diet flexibility. Diet flexibility means something comes up and you don't have exactly what you plan on eating. So you can make an adjustment. Might not be perfect, but it's going to be pretty close and you're going to keep it moving. Like that is what the flexibility is. So that's where this kind of mindset comes from. If you have a growth mindset, you'll look at this as like, okay, this isn't an ideal situation, but I'm not going to crumble and fall apart because it's not perfect. I'm going to do, a pretty good job, maybe 85% here, and then I move forward. But the alternative, what is the alternative? Like you can either make a 85% good choice instead of 100, or you can make like a fucking negative choice and have just really bad options, right? And let that behavior continue for multiple more days. So those are the types of things that, why this is so important. And it really is the foundation for just long-term change with anything.
And I like that you use percentages, because I just had two clients I talked about this with, is that especially with when we first start tracking macros, I'd rather you have 7 days in a row where you were 80% on than have a day where you're 100% on and then you work so hard that one day that the next day you're 0% because you exhaust yourself, and then it's back to 80 and then it's 20. I'd rather you be able to be consistent at 80% because then we need to know. And same thing with being okay with 80% and recognizing that it doesn't have to be 100% all the time, and that setting that standard for yourself is unreasonable. So being able to have the growth mindset to recognize I might only get 80%, but I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to be able to then grow by being consistent or by giving myself that grace.
And then by doing 80% for a while, right, that becomes kind of the norm. That becomes easy. Then it's easier to hit 85%, right? Like you can kind of dial it in a little bit. And then it becomes like, hey, most of my days are like kind of 90 and above. Every once in a while, some shit happens, but like, that's okay. And that's part of it. So I think that that's also important for people to understand too. Like, we're not saying like, hey, just kind of coast by in life and like kind of get some stuff done. Like, no, that's not what we're saying either. But if you are starting at 0, you cannot expect to go to 100 and sustain 100 for a long time. Going from 0 to 80 is fucking awesome. Can we maintain 80 for a while? Cool. Now can we go to 82? Now are we at 87? Like we're inching our way up here. But it's really lost when people are consistently doing, 0 to 100. And then, that's again where kind of the yo-yo dieting comes in. That's where all these metabolic adaptations come in. That's when your hormones are all over the board. Like there's just a lot of negative issues that come from that, of course. And then, your relationship with food as well. So what are some of the things that you like to work on this going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset that you want to talk about?
So I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about how competing helped me with this and kind of use some examples from that as ways I think you can apply this in life in general, but competing and even just dieting in general were some of the biggest ways that I shifted my mindset. And so I just thought I'd go through a couple of those examples. The first one is competing related, and you're really focused on the process. Especially with competing, you are on stage for like a minuscule amount of time in comparison to the time that you're in prep.
Oh yeah.
If you focus on that as being your like end all be all, like you're going to be sorely disappointed because it will never live up to the work you put in. So being able to focus on the process and like how well you're doing from day to day, like is a lot more important. And it does give you that growth mindset of like, how did today go? How can I make today better? And celebrating the days that you had good days. And then still being able to enjoy the stage, obviously, but it just really is not the whole picture.
Anytime, I would say that honestly, I mean, pick really any goal, whether it's an athletic event, whether it's a academic achievement, you wanted to get a degree, you wanted to publish a paper,
Yeah.
Say you're literally, you're trying to move up in your career, right? Like to the next position, whatever it might be, buying a house, literally anything. The final product is like the tiniest amount of time in comparison to the entire process moving up to it. So particularly for stage bodybuilding, the thing about bodybuilding that's so different than most sports, and I know people are going to say, well, that's not true. It really is a 24/7 type of thing. I get it. If you are trying to be the best in any sport, it's a 24/7 thing. It's a mindset. It's how you eat. It's how you sleep. It's how you recover. I totally get it. But with bodybuilding, it is like 100% 24/7, right? Like it's not just like, oh, my training and like I can kind of eat well. Like, no, training, cardio, sleep, your diet is super aggressive. It's just so different because the diet is so much more aggressive than most other athletic endeavors.
Yeah.
I think that's really where the big difference comes. And you can't escape it. You can't be like, oh, I'm just, like for me doing jiu-jitsu right now. Okay, like I have to eat enough to fuel myself properly. I've been doing this for so long. It's super easy.
Yeah.
Obviously I got to sleep, got to make sure that I'm feeling good. But most of the work is done like when I'm in class, when I'm rolling, when we're practicing. And then I leave and then my life is normal. And then I go back the next day and I do it, right? Like it doesn't feel like it's like this constant thing besides like the bruises and the injuries. But besides that, with bodybuilding, it's like the time you open your eyes to the time you go to sleep, you're doing bodybuilding stuff because that's how everything is just connected. Particularly because the diet is such a harsh driver of what you're doing. So yeah, you can't just focus on that outcome for the stage. As you said, you'll be sorely disappointed when you realize that you're on stage for maybe 5 minutes out of a like 6-month prep.
Yeah. And especially if you don't do well, which is something we'll talk about later, like
Whole different, yeah.
that's a whole different thing. But like you were just saying, then my next point was like, you're going to have to overcome obstacles. And with prep, it is day-to-day obstacles of being hungry and being out of food, or not wanting to do cardio and having to do cardio, or having to fit, especially having to fit those things into your existing life, because life doesn't stop when you're in prep. So you still have work and families and obligations, and you have to make those things fit, and you have to overcome the obstacles that are in place. And if you see those obstacles as constant barriers and constant like, oh, what was me? I have this work event, and like you are going to hate prep. But if you can see those obstacles as opportunities, be like, okay, I got a busy day. How am I going to do this? Like, let's fit it in. Like, it's going to be a lot more enjoyable, and you're going to get a lot more out of it. And that's the difference between a growth and fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is going to say like, I can't do this because I have all this stuff going on. And the growth mindset is going to say, okay, it's going to be harder because of all the stuff going on, but I'm going to rise to that challenge and I'm going to overcome it.
And I think once you go into it with that too, you almost eliminate a lot of the other noise, right? So one thing that is great, and this can be where prep gets taken to the extreme with people not being able to not compete. They, because there is so much structure, right? You have to eat a certain amount of food, you have a certain amount of water, you got to, do your training, everything has to be so perfectly organized that people become actually hyper focused and like hyper productive, because they have to dial everything in, right? So then people are like, oh my God, my life is so much better when I'm on prep, actually, because you're cutting out the other noise, because you say, hey, these are the things that I have to do in a day. And then when other stuff comes up, I kind of fit it into my life. So take that and put that into your regular life. Like, you're just not in the super extreme calorie deficit, and you probably don't have to do as much cardio. So cool. Yeah. But you can still do it when you're not in prep. You have to be self-motivated to do it. With prep, the motivation is there. Hey, I'm getting on stage in a bikini in front of strangers in a few months. Kind of want to make sure you're hitting everything. When you don't have that goal, a lot of times people can't continue that kind of, time management, that discipline and all those things. But really, that's the reason people love doing this. And that's why they're so successful, because everything else in your life, like you're cutting out the noise. So if you just go into your day and go, hey, these are the things I need to do, is kind of like my bare minimum non-negotiables, everything else fits around it so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next point, like we've hit on enough, I think, but is you learn from your mistakes, especially in prep. Like your some days aren't as good as others, and you learn like, I know that I can't put my cardio off until the end of the day, or I'm not going to do it. And then it ends up all piling up on Sunday. So I have to do this in the morning.
Yeah.
Or
you learn real quick not to do that.
Exactly. Like little things like that, though, like the foods that fit, the foods that don't, the foods that are triggers and that don't fill you up. Like you learn all those things. And one of the biggest things that is hard, especially like for me as a first time competitor. I was like, it took me a second, but is that the biggest thing that you can take away from the stage is the judges' feedback. And that's hard to hear sometimes, especially when you're type A and you're like, I brought my best, I look great. And then they're like, yeah, your shoulders are way too small. And you're like, what? Like, that's hard to hear, but that's the thing, the mistakes and the critiques that you can learn from to get better, as opposed to being like, oh, I'm a failure, they hated me. It's like, no, they just are helping you be better.
Exactly. Especially in a subjective sport. Yes, do we compete to win? Of course, right? Like, why? Like, you're not competing to not do well. Like, nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, there's somebody's going to get first, somebody's going to get second and third and so on. And you might not place at all, right? But in reality, it is a subjective sport, and everybody is coming in with very different backgrounds, very different body types, particularly in the bikini division, which is what you do, which is what I do. So very different body types. The standard is not, there's a standard, but there's a lot of bodies that fit within that standard, right? Yeah. So it can be very frustrating to people. And I was literally just at a show with a client on Monday. Yes, Monday. It was weird, but we were there. And, she got third, and the top three, like, it was literally like apple, orange, banana, like completely different bodies were all in that top three. And people go, well, that doesn't make any sense. But it does, because they all fit the criteria, but they just all look a little bit different because that's their body. So sometimes, you have to realize going into this, hey, this is subjective. I'm going to take this feedback. I'm going to take it seriously. And, you just have to move forward, and you have to really detach from those feelings. And it doesn't mean that you are a failure. It just means, and it's not even like a thing of like, I'm going to try harder next time. Like, maybe you could, like, maybe if you didn't do everything in your power to have your best prep, you could have tried harder. But it's not like, hey, I was trying to squat 600 pounds and I squatted 590. It's like, that's very concrete. Like, you're going to try to hit 600 next time or more. Well, with bodybuilding, it's not really like that. Like, it's going to be, okay, yeah, I thought I did my best, and you might have gotten first, or you might have gotten ninth.
Yeah. And that goes to another point, is that it's so much about comparison to yourself and not others, because you, first of all, you have no idea who's going to be there. So it's not like you can compare and be like, I know Lauren's going to be there. I know she's got like the best glutes. I'm really going to have to work on my glutes. Like, you can't do that. No. Hey, I'm just hyping you up.
Thanks.
You just can't do that. And that's something that I did struggle with. Both my shows, I was like laying awake, like, oh my God, who's going to be here? But you just can't control it. And all you can do is focus on yourself. And again, you don't know what judges are going to be there and what they're going to be looking for that day. It's so subjective that you can't focus on anything but yourself.
For sure.
Yeah. And then the last thing is just that when you compete, like, you are doing something that you have no idea what the outcome would be. And that kind of goes to your point too. Like, you don't know if you're going to win or lose. Like, you might feel the best ever. And especially as a first time competitor, when you don't know what the hell you're doing, like, you're stepping into a world that is unknown and a challenge, and you could very well fail, but doing it anyway is the only way that you're going to learn how to pose. It's the only way that the only way you're going to do it is to do it. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I was most proud of when I did it, that broke me out of my growth mindset. It was like, or broke me out of my fixed mindset, was that success was not guaranteed, and I did it anyway. And then that got me to do things that I wouldn't have done. Like, I wouldn't be here, like, on this podcast with you, had I not, like, gotten out of that fixed mindset, because I was such a, like, I don't have a formal education, I can't do this. And I would have said, like, no, I'm not good enough. But now I know that I can learn, I can grow. It got me through my master's without any background education. It's just, doing something anyway is the scariest thing. And it does take a growth mindset to be able to do that.
And I really want to touch on that point that you said, pretty much you took that initiative, right? Like, you had all these thoughts about yourself in this fixed kind of way. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I'm going to fail at this, whatever you're saying, right? But you didn't just say, I have a growth mindset. Like, I'm great. I'm this. No, you took action, you took initiative, and you created those opportunities and those scenarios for yourself. They weren't handed to you. They didn't just happen because you wanted to have a growth mindset. You didn't deserve to have it because you didn't have those skills before. And now you actually went ahead and put in that work. And now you can reap those rewards. Does that mean that the reward is that you won your show?
Yeah.
You did, but let's just say you didn't, right? Like that was a great situation. That was an awesome outcome, right? But that's not necessarily like, what we're talking about here. But the reason that you were successful in all these things is because you took that initiative and you actually did put yourself in those hard situations. This is actually one of the things that has been the scariest for me when I've been doing jujitsu as well, because it's 100% outside of my comfort zone. Everything about it feels like a failure because it's not intuitive to me whatsoever. Like, I mean, I couldn't say, oh, this is like the hardest thing I've ever done, for sure, because I don't have a lot of body awareness. I never had any of this kind of background skills like you're talking about. So pretty much even now, like a year into doing this, I come into class and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, obviously I know more than I did a year ago, right? But like, there's still a lot of like, this failure of, okay, oh, I should have known this move, or I should have done this. And I find myself beating myself up all the time. And that's why I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do a competition. Doesn't matter, win or lose. Like, it's a very clear, like, somebody win, somebody lose in that. There are points. So I guess it is slightly subjective. You could see like if the judge isn't good, but in any case, let's just say submissions, right? Somebody gets submitted, somebody doesn't. Like, that is how you get better. Like, you have to go in there, you have to do it, you have to put yourself into this challenge, and knowing, okay, yeah, I could easily walk away and lose all of the matches that I just did. That would be slightly embarrassing for, a day or two. And then I move forward, and then I figure out, okay, what did I learn? Did I freeze? Did I get nervous? Like, did I just not have as good of skills as the other person? Like, what was it? And then it's the same thing with competing, like you said, listening to the judges' feedback. Okay, I need to work my shoulders. All right, well, I got to get to work. Like, this is what I have to do. And you can wallow in pity, like, oh, my shoulders are small. Or you can say, okay, time to move forward. So I think that just in general, those were such great examples for people to put. So I think a lot of times, like, all of this stuff is so like hypothetical, like growth mindset, yay, like all these things, right? And then we can just be like, well, how do we actually put this into practice? So I think that was those were really great points. And obviously a lot of people who listen to this are interested in either physique sports or just competing in general, no matter what it is. So yeah, to kind of highlight it again, focus on the process, learning to overcome obstacles, learning from your mistakes, doing something that you could fail at, and you most likely are going to fail at, and still doing it anyway. And then comparing yourself to, yourself instead of others. Yeah, so I think that was really awesome. I think it was going to be really helpful for people. Like I said, this is something that I've really tried to shift focus on with coaching over the years, just because it's less about like, hey, here's the perfect program. Of course, you still need to have good principles. You need to have a good program. You know what I mean? I couldn't tell somebody to like go do some crazy thing. If you guys listened to the last podcast, any of those crazy diets, oh my God, like, yeah. So clearly the right plan is important. Don't be doing the werewolf diet and then try to have a growth mindset. Like, fix that part first. But after that, once you have a solid plan down that has sound nutritional and training advice, this is really what people need to work on. So is there anything else that you want to add, Sam, to wrap it up?
I think that's awesome.
And yeah, just one more time, don't do the werewolf diet, guys, okay? If you hear that, don't do any of the diets we talked about last time. I'm still horrified that people are over here like eating baby food and doing crazy shit like this. Like, hey, 2020, we don't need to be doing, like, there is ample advice on the internet. Just like literally listen to any of our other podcasts and you can be like, oh, this is sound advice.
I'm writing an article right now about our moms in the 80s and doing like the cabbage diet. I'm so depressed to hear that it's only gotten crazier.
I know, like, you'd think that it would be done by now. There's like that one really famous, it's not really a meme, it's just like a picture. I think it was like in Vogue or something, and it was like the diet was like black coffee and like egg whites and like wine. Like, it was like the most like, I was like, well, I could probably get down with this, but
Is that your diet?
like, is this my diet? Did you guys think page out of my notebook? But yeah, like, there's just always been crazy. I think even my grandma did like the grapefruit diet. Like, like there's always that, like, people just eating grapefruits. Like, what the fuck?
The cookie diet.
What are you guys doing? But in any case, yeah, if you have any more questions for us, of course, let us know. You can visit our website, teamlocofit.com, to listen to the other podcasts. You can check out the articles that we've written, any of the products that we have. Then, of course, if you want to apply for coaching, you can do so there as well. So thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it as always, and we will catch you next time.